Imagine a world where superheroes never made it beyond the pages of comic books, where Iron Man was nothing more than a B-list character collecting dust in comic shops. In 2008, no one could have predicted that a single film would ignite a revolution in cinema, transform Hollywood's business model, and shape global culture for generations. Yet against impossible odds, Iron Man didn't just succeed, it rewrote history. This is the story of how Marvel Studios was born, how one gamble turned into an empire, and how Iron Man changed Hollywood forever. The Forgotten Age. In the late 1990s, Marvel wasn't the entertainment powerhouse we know today. It was drowning. Comic book sales were collapsing. The brand that once gave birth to legends like Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four had filed for bankruptcy in 1996. Its characters were scattered across Hollywood like orphans. Spider-Man with Sony, X-Men with Fox, Hulk with Universal. Marvel itself had almost nothing. Hollywood saw superheroes as risky. Strange men in tights, good for kids but not for serious cinema. Batman and Superman had their runs, but Marvel was an afterthought. Few could imagine Iron Man, a character no mainstream audience cared about, becoming the cornerstone of a global phenomenon. And yet within this crisis, seeds of the impossible were planted. A desperate gamble. In 2003, a man named Avi Arad, then head of Marvel's film division, believed the company should stop selling characters and start making movies themselves. But they had no studio, no track record, and no money. That's when David Maisel, an executive with vision, entered the scene. He suggested something insane. Marvel would finance its own films by using its character library as collateral for a massive loan. Think about that for a moment. Marvel literally put its heroes on the line. If they failed, they would lose them forever. If they succeeded, they could change Hollywood. It was a high-stakes gamble, unlike anything in the industry. Against all odds, Merrill Lynch agreed. A $525 million credit facility was secured. Marvel Studios was officially born. Choosing the hero. Now came the question, which character would launch the studio? Spider-Man and X-Men were gone. Fantastic Four was with Fox. Hulk was controlled by Universal. The heavy hitters were off the table. What remained were second-tier names: Thor, Captain America, Ant-Man, and Iron Man. Iron Man was considered a C-list hero even inside Marvel. Kids didn't wear Iron Man costumes on Halloween. He wasn't selling toys. But the character had one advantage. He was completely owned by Marvel. No studio interference, no complicated rights. If Marvel wanted to prove itself, Iron Man was the only option. It was like trying to build an empire on sand. And yet history shows us that sometimes the least likely hero becomes the greatest of all. The broken star. But who would play Iron Man? Hollywood didn't exactly line up A-list actors for superhero roles back then. There was skepticism, fear of typecasting, and the stigma that comic book movies weren't serious. Marvel's executives wanted a safe, bankable star. Then came Jon Favreau, the director chosen to helm the project. Favreau had a radical vision. He didn't want a traditional hero. He wanted someone flawed, unpredictable, even broken. And in that brokenness, he saw one man, Robert Downey Jr. At the time, Downey was a gamble that made Marvel nervous. He was fresh off years of scandal, drug addiction, arrests, prison time. Hollywood had practically abandoned him. Insurance companies didn't want to cover him. Studios didn't trust him. But Favreau insisted, Downey is Tony Stark. The arrogance, the charm, the genius with a self-destructive edge. It wasn't acting. It was lived experience. And against resistance, Robert Downey Jr. was cast. It was one broken man playing another. What no one knew yet was that this gamble would change cinema forever. Building a universe Iron Man wasn't designed to be just a movie. Marvel Studios had a vision, a connected universe of films, something Hollywood had never seen before. Most studios thought it was madness. Shared universes were for comics, not movies. But Marvel had a secret weapon: producer Kevin Feige. A lifelong comic book fan and detail-obsessed creative, Feige understood that Marvel's greatest power wasn't just individual heroes, but how they lived and fought in the same world. If Iron Man succeeded, Marvel would launch something revolutionary: the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The unscripted magic. Unlike traditional blockbusters, much of Iron Man's dialogue was improvised. The script was constantly rewritten. Favreau encouraged spontaneity. Robert Downey Jr., with his razor-sharp wit, delivered lines that weren't on the page but became legendary. That famous moment where Tony Stark declares, "I am Iron Man," that wasn't planned. It was Downey being Downey, and it changed everything. Marvel embraced chaos. They were underfunded compared to big studios, and yet they thrived by leaning into creativity, authenticity, and risk-taking. The release. Nobody expected. On May 2, 2008, Iron Man hit theaters. Expectations were low. Analysts predicted moderate success at best. But then the impossible happened. Audiences didn't just like it, they loved it. Robert Downey Jr.'s performance was electric. The humor, the realism, the raw humanity of Tony Stark. It was unlike any superhero movie before. The film grossed $585 million worldwide. Critics praised it. Fans were blown away. Suddenly, Iron Man, a character nobody cared about, was a global icon. And Marvel Studios had pulled off the unthinkable. The secret ending. But what truly changed Hollywood came after the credits. In a bold move, Marvel added a hidden scene, Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, stepping out of the shadows to tell Tony Stark, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative." It was short, it was mysterious, but it was revolutionary. Audiences had never seen anything like it. A single scene teased a larger universe, promising more heroes, more stories, more connections. It turned a movie into a movement, and Hollywood would never be the same. The shockwave across Hollywood. Suddenly every studio wanted a universe. Warner Brothers scrambled with DC. Universal tried with monsters. Sony attempted with Spider-Man spin-offs, but none could replicate the magic. Why? Because Marvel had something others didn't. Patience, planning, and characters that audiences believed in. But let's not forget, everything began with a desperate gamble, a flawed actor, and a film no one expected to work. Iron Man was more than a movie. It was a resurrection, not just for Marvel, but for Robert Downey Jr., for superhero cinema, and for Hollywood itself. Untold stories behind the scenes. Few know how fragile it all was. The film's budget was tight. Visual effects were unfinished until the last moment. The script was incomplete during shooting. Favreau and his team worked under immense pressure, knowing that if Iron Man failed, Marvel Studios might collapse entirely. And yet perhaps that's why it worked, because desperation fuels innovation. Favreau allowed his cast to experiment. Downey brought emotional truth. The team believed they weren't just making a movie, they were building a future. Legacy born in fire. The success of Iron Man was more than financial. It shifted the balance of power in Hollywood. Marvel no longer had to sell its characters. Now studios came to them. Audiences didn't just watch Iron Man, they wanted more. Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, all were waiting in the wings. But it wasn't just the heroes who rose, it was Robert Downey Jr. himself. The broken star who had nearly lost everything was now at the center of the biggest cultural movement of the century. Iron Man saved Marvel, but it also saved him. And if you've made it this far, you're already part of this story. Because what Marvel built wasn't just entertainment, it was a shared experience that united people across the world. If you want to keep exploring the hidden truths, untold struggles, and legends behind cinema's greatest revolution, stay with us until the end. The world before and after. Before Iron Man, superhero films were isolated, self-contained, often disposable. After Iron Man, everything changed. Shared universes became the blueprint. The Marvel Cinematic Universe would dominate box offices for over a decade, influencing not just films but streaming, merchandise, even theme parks. The gamble had paid off, and in doing so, Marvel proved that the world was ready for something bigger, a saga that would stretch across years, characters, and generations. The birth of Marvel Studios wasn't just about a company making a movie. It was about defying bankruptcy, reclaiming forgotten heroes, and betting everything on a man the world had given up on. Iron Man wasn't supposed to work, but because it did, The world would never be the same again. This was only the beginning, because the rise of Marvel Studios was far from over, and the story of how Iron Man changed Hollywood forever had just started. After the spark. When Iron Man exploded in 2008, it didn't just launch a character, it ignited a movement. But one film does not make a universe. The true challenge was only beginning. Could Marvel Studios replicate success? Could lightning strike twice? Or would the bold dream of a cinematic universe crumble under its own ambition? Marvel knew the answer would define not just their future, but the future of Hollywood itself. The incredible setback. Hot on the heels of Iron Man, Marvel released The Incredible Hulk in 2008. Unlike Tony Stark's triumphant debut, this film stumbled. Starring Edward Norton, it struggled with rewrites, studio clashes, and behind-the-scenes tension. While it wasn't a disaster, it failed to capture hearts. For a moment, doubts resurfaced. Maybe Iron Man was a fluke. Maybe audiences weren't ready for a connected universe. The dream wavered, but Marvel pressed forward, determined that failure would not define them. The master planner. At the center of it all was Kevin Feige. Quiet, meticulous, and visionary, Feige became the architect of the MCU. He saw what others missed. Success wasn't about one film, it was about weaving a tapestry. Each character, each storyline, each after-credits scene was a thread in something greater. Where studios sought quick cash grabs, Feige played the long game. His belief in patience, continuity, and respect for the audience became the secret ingredient of Marvel's rise. Building block by block. The next steps were crucial. Marvel needed heroes who could stand alongside Iron Man. In 2010 came Iron Man 2, a film weighed down by expectations, rushed timelines, and corporate interference. While it made money, critics sensed the cracks. But then Marvel unveiled Thor in 2011. A cosmic gamble, it introduced gods, realms, and mythologies that tested audience belief. And yet, people embraced it. In the same year came Captain America, the first Avenger, grounding the universe in wartime history. Piece by piece, Marvel built the foundation of something unprecedented, the Disney acquisition. In 2009, a seismic shift occurred. The Walt Disney Company acquired Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion. To skeptics, it was madness. Why would Disney bet billions on a struggling comic book company? But Bob Iger, Disney's CEO, saw what others couldn't: the birth of a new mythology. With Disney's financial power and global reach, Marvel suddenly had resources to match its ambition. Yet the heart of the studio, the creative freedom, the risks, the passion, remained under Kevin Feige and his team. Disney gave wings, but Marvel charted the flight. The Avengers gamble. Everything was leading to one impossible moment: The Avengers in 2012. Never before had Hollywood combined multiple franchises into one shared film. Studios laughed at the idea. Too complicated, they said. Audiences won't follow it. But Marvel pressed on. When The Avengers premiered, it shattered records. Grossing $1.5 billion worldwide, it proved the universe model worked. For the first time, superheroes weren't isolated. They were family. Audiences didn't just watch a movie, they witnessed history. The broken bonds behind the scenes. But success often hides fractures. Behind the curtain, Marvel wrestled with internal conflicts. Directors clashed with executives. Writers struggled with continuity demands. Edward Norton, once Hulk, departed amid creative disagreements, replaced by Mark Ruffalo. Terrence Howard, the original Rhodey, was recast. The MCU looked seamless on screen, but off-screen it was chaos. Every step forward was a battle between art and commerce, ego and vision, risk and reward. The untold struggle of Phase 2. After The Avengers, expectations skyrocketed. Every film had to be bigger, smarter, better. In 2013, Iron Man 3 pushed Tony Stark to his limits, grossing over $1 billion despite dividing fans. Thor. The Dark World stumbled critically, nearly derailing cosmic expansion. Yet Marvel found hope in unexpected places. Guardians of the Galaxy in 2014 was a bizarre gamble. Talking raccoons, a tree that says only 3 words, and a soundtrack of forgotten hits. Everyone predicted failure. Instead, it became a cultural phenomenon, proving Marvel could turn the weirdest ideas into gold. Rivalries in Hollywood. Marvel's success did not go unnoticed. Warner Brothers scrambled to launch the DC Extended Universe. Hoping to rival Marvel with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, Universal attempted to build a dark universe with classic monsters. Sony expanded Spider-Man, but none could replicate the magic. Why? Because Marvel's strength wasn't speed, it was patience. Rivals rushed to copy the formula, but they lacked the years of careful planning and trust Marvel had built. Hollywood had entered a new era, the age of cinematic universes, but only Marvel held the crown. Robert Downey Jr., the soul of the MCU. Through it all, one figure remained the heartbeat of Marvel, Robert Downey Jr. His Tony Stark wasn't just a character. He was the symbol of Marvel's gamble, its comeback, its triumph. Downey became the highest-paid actor in Hollywood. But more than that, he became a cultural icon. Kids wanted to be him. Adults related to him. He embodied redemption, reminding the world that even broken men can become heroes. And in doing so, Downey himself was redeemed. Iron Man saved Marvel, but it also saved Robert Downey Jr.'s life. Expanding the universe. As Phase 2 continued, Marvel introduced new heroes, Doctor Strange, Ant-Man, Black Panther, Captain Marvel. Each brought fresh perspectives, cultures, and tones. Marvel wasn't just building movies, they were building worlds. Diversity grew, storylines deepened, and the stakes kept rising. By the time Captain America: Civil War arrived in 2016, audiences had become emotionally invested. Heroes fought not just villains, but each other. The MCU wasn't just entertainment, it was modern mythology unfolding in real time. The weight of expectations. Yet the higher Marvel climbed, the greater the weight of expectation. Every premiere was a global event. Every trailer broke the internet. Every decision sparked debate. Fans demanded perfection. Critics questioned longevity. Could the MCU really sustain itself, or would it collapse under its own ambition? Behind closed doors, Marvel executives asked the same. But Kevin Feige believed the answer lay in one guiding principle: respect the audience. Don't underestimate them. Don't betray their trust. Always deliver more than expected. The dark shadows. Marvel's rise wasn't free from controversy. Creative differences led to public clashes. Directors like Edgar Wright departed projects. Some fans accused Marvel of formulaic storytelling. Others criticized lack of risks. And yet, each controversy became part of the journey. Because greatness isn't born in comfort, it's forged in struggle. And every setback forced Marvel to adapt, evolve, and grow stronger. The global phenomenon. By the mid-2010s, Marvel wasn't just dominating Hollywood, it was shaping culture. Children wore Avengers backpacks to school. Adults debated theories online. Governments noticed the economic impact. Marvel became more than cinema. It became community, connection, identity. Across languages, religions, and nations, people united around these heroes, and it all traced back to a gamble in 2008. Marvel Studios' rise after Iron Man was not easy. It was filled with missteps, controversies, and risks that could have ended everything. But each challenge built momentum. Each film built faith. The MCU was no longer an experiment. It was a cultural force, rewriting Hollywood's rulebook. But the greatest test was yet to come. A challenge that would determine not only Marvel's legacy, but also Robert Downey Jr.'s. For every empire must face its reckoning, and Marvel's moment of truth was approaching. The dawn of infinity. By 2016, Marvel Studios had become a juggernaut. Every release was a cultural earthquake, yet beneath the triumph lay a looming question. How do you top the impossible? The Avengers had proven the universe worked. But Feige's eyes were on something bigger. A saga spanning a decade, uniting every hero, culminating in the ultimate showdown. That dream had a name: Infinity War. A mad titan rises. For years, Marvel had teased a shadowy figure, Thanos, the Mad Titan. Fans caught glimpses in post-credit scenes, whispers of an infinity gauntlet, hints of cosmic power. But when Avengers: Infinity War finally arrived in 2018, audiences witnessed a bold twist. The villain was the protagonist. Thanos wasn't just another CGI monster. He had motives, philosophy, even twisted morality. And by the film's end, in a moment of devastating silence, he won. Half of all life in the universe turned to dust. Heroes vanished before our eyes. For the first time, the MCU ended not with victory, but with despair. A world in mourning. The impact was seismic. Audiences left theaters stunned, some in tears. Children asked parents why Spider-Man had to die. Adults debated Thanos' logic. The cultural shockwave was unprecedented. Superhero films weren't supposed to end like this, and yet, Marvel had pulled off the impossible, a blockbuster tragedy. But this wasn't the end. It was the setup for the grandest finale in cinematic history. Endgame, the final chapter. In April 2019, after 11 years of storytelling, Avengers: Endgame arrived. The anticipation was unlike anything cinema had seen. Midnight premieres sold out worldwide. Fans camped outside theaters. The global box office trembled in advance. And then, it delivered. A 3-hour epic that tied together a decade of films, honoring every character, every arc, every sacrifice. Nostalgia, laughter, heartbreak, it was all there. The MCU had become a living tapestry, and Endgame was its crown jewel. The final sacrifice. But at the heart of it all was one man, Tony Stark. From a selfish billionaire in 2008 to a selfless savior in 2019, his journey defined the MCU. In the climactic battle, with the universe on the brink, Tony wielded the Infinity Stones. With a trembling voice, he declared the line that mirrored the beginning. "I am Iron Man." A snap of fingers. A blinding light. Thanos defeated. The universe saved. And Tony Stark, gone. The theater erupted in sobs. Grown men wept. Families held hands. A fictional character's death felt like losing a friend. Robert Downey Jr.'s farewell wasn't just acting, it was history. Goosebumps across the globe. The funeral scene in Endgame became a moment of collective mourning. Fans worldwide lit candles, wrote tributes, even built shrines. The man who once was a broken star, doubted, dismissed, and forgotten, had become the beating heart of modern mythology. Iron Man wasn't just a character. He was a symbol of redemption, of resilience, of belief that even the most flawed among us can rise to greatness. Box office: Earthquake Endgame grossed $2.798 billion worldwide, briefly becoming the highest-grossing film of all time. But the numbers were only part of the story. What mattered was the experience. Millions of people across languages and continents shared tears, cheers, and silence together. Cinema had become a global village, and Marvel was the storyteller. A new Hollywood, the impact of Iron Man in 2008 was now undeniable. It had restructured Hollywood's very DNA. Franchises weren't isolated anymore. They were interconnected. Studios no longer bet on one movie. They bet on universes. Streaming platforms studied Marvel's blueprint. Disney Plus was born with Marvel at its core. Merchandising exploded. Theme parks transformed. Even politics borrowed Marvel's language, invoking Avengers metaphors in speeches. Iron Man hadn't just saved Marvel. He had changed Hollywood and the world, the shadow of criticism. Of course, not all voices praised the MCU. Legendary directors like Martin Scorsese dismissed Marvel films as theme parks. Critics worried cinema was losing variety, swallowed by franchises. Some feared originality would die. And yet, audiences voted with their hearts. They kept coming, kept caring, kept connecting. Whatever flaws the MCU had, its power to unite humanity around shared stories was undeniable. Hidden struggles within Marvel. Behind the glory, Marvel continued to wrestle with challenges. Actors aged out of roles, contracts ended. Maintaining continuity grew harder. The very formula that brought success risked becoming predictable. But history had already been written. Marvel had redefined the industry. Even if the empire someday falls, its impact will echo for generations. The redemption of Robert Downey Jr. Above all, the greatest legacy may not belong to Marvel Studios, but to the man who embodied its first hero. Robert Downey Jr.'s transformation from scandal to superstardom remains one of Hollywood's most extraordinary comebacks. He didn't just play Iron Man, he lived him. The genius, the flaws, the arrogance, the redemption. It was Robert's story too. And by the end, audiences weren't just applauding a role. They were celebrating a man who had found his second chance. A cultural legacy. Think about it. In 1996, Marvel was bankrupt. By 2019, it was shaping global culture. Children in Mumbai, teenagers in Lagos, adults in New York, all shared the same heroes. The MCU wasn't American or Western, it was universal. The true power of Marvel was not box office records, but emotional resonance. It gave people hope. It reminded them of sacrifice, courage, and unity. In a divided world, it built a common language. The echo of a line. And it all began with one improvised line in 2008. "I am Iron Man." A moment that wasn't scripted, a line that wasn't planned, yet it became the heartbeat of an entire generation. From the beginning to the end, those words framed the MCU. They framed Tony's journey, and they framed Marvel's legacy. The global inspiration. Today, every filmmaker, every studio, every storyteller studies Marvel. Whether they love it or criticize it, no one can ignore it. The MCU proved that audiences are willing to invest in long-term storytelling, to follow characters across decades, to treat cinema as mythology. It wasn't just about superheroes, it was about daring to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. Final reflection. The birth of Marvel Studios and the success of Iron Man was more than a business story. It was a story of risk, redemption, and revolution. A bankrupt company betting on forgotten heroes, a broken actor proving the world wrong, a studio daring to build the impossible. And in the end, it worked. Against every odd, it worked. So the next time you see a child wearing an Iron Man mask, or you hear the roar of an audience when heroes unite, remember this. It all began in 2008 with a gamble no one believed in. A bankrupt company, a flawed actor, a C-list hero. From the ashes of failure, they forged a new mythology. They changed Hollywood forever. And when Tony Stark snapped his fingers, he didn't just save the universe. He reminded us all of something greater. That no matter how broken, forgotten, or underestimated we are, every one of us has the power to rise, to fight, and to change the world. Because sometimes the hero we least expect becomes the legend we'll never forget.